Okay, so I had to come to the office today because whatever. But on the drive here, I was thinking about Karen Read because I'm obsessed. But I started to think about whether or not we're having the wrong conversation, or at least I am having the wrong conversation about the Karen Read case. I think I get so frustrated because I try to have a common sense conversation. I try to have a common sense conversation because you can't have a common sense conversation and think that this makes sense. I do not know whether or not I believe Karen Read did it, but I feel like I'm 95.5 that she couldn't have. And I'll tell you, and that seems like common sense to me. And I'll tell you why. I feel that way because everything would have had to go perfect for her that night. And everything had to go terribly wrong for everybody else. And that just doesn't happen, right? It just so happens that at the time she hit him, no one was looking outside, no one heard anything, and no one saw him for 6 hours. It just so happened that she drove past all these places, all these cameras, and nobody caught a picture of the taillight. It just so happens that when the police get there that night, all the taillight pieces are under the snow. So nobody find any tail pieces that night. It just so happens that she's at home at 12:31 when they think he was hit at 12:45. So that messes up the time. Like, all of these things had to fall perfectly in place for her and fall perfectly out of place for everyone else, namely Officer John O'Keefe. It just happened to be that nobody saw him for 6 hours. It had to fall out of place for Jen McCabe. It just so happens that she's present at everybody's interview, and it just so happens that the search that I really did at 6 comes up at 2:30 on the Celebrate. It just so happens that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert get rid of their phones the day before the preservation orders. That just happens. It's not anything. It just happens. It just so happens that they got rid of their dog. It just so happens that they sold their home and redid the basement. It just so happens that Brian Higgins needed to go back to the police station that night for who knows what reason. It just so happens that this is the night everybody's phones want to call each other. Nobody's talking, but everybody wants to call each other. It's like so many things had to fall into place. And that doesn't make sense. And for me, that's common sense. But that's the wrong conversation we're having because common sense ain't common. You wasn't born with it. It might be Maybelline. I think we need to have an empathy conversation, right? Because for me, regardless if she did it or not, I would still be on the side of she should not go to prison because this investigation was shitty and these officers are terrible. And that's an empathy part of me. That's me saying that I don't want what's happening to Karen Read to happen to anybody else. I don't think it could ever happen to me because I wouldn't step foot in Massachusetts. But the people of that town, the people of that county, I don't want to happen to them. And I'm nothing like those people. I'll never be around those people. But the empathy of me wants it so that it doesn't happen to anyone. And I think the people that want Karen Read to go to prison are lacking empathy because they believe that she did it. So they believe that, yes, the investigation was shitty, and you have to believe the investigation was shitty. If you do not believe the investigation was shitty, then I'm not even talking to you. You're off on Mars somewhere. They have to believe the investigation was shitty, and they have to decide they don't care that the investigation was shitty because she is guilty and she deserves to go to prison. And that lacks empathy because they fail to look at the broader picture. The broader picture is if they do it to her, they will do it to someone else. And it might not be you. But they can't see outside themselves. In their minds, I would never be in this position. I would never do this, so it would never happen to me. So I'm okay with it happening to her. And that is scary. This world is losing its humanity and its empathy. And I think the Kieran Read trial is shining a big, broad light on that. Tell me what you guys think. Am I off the wall? Let me know.